thinking about 2024, it was without a doubt a watershed year from a risk management, cybersecurity perspective in the industry that CoreLogic plays in. It forced us to be more nimble. It forced us to rethink what we're doing. Having that automation to where I can go into a platform and pull up my dashboard and say, well, now I've got this level of risk, right? So I didn't when I went to bed and now I've got it, right? That's critical, right? We need to have that in our industry to be able to appropriately manage the risk because it's moving so fast.
Hello, and welcome to the Cyber Risk Podcast. Joining us today for a discussion on cyber risk management is Rob Tennant, the Deputy CISO at CoreLogic. CoreLogic is a leading provider of data and analytics solution to the real estate, mortgage, insurance, and government sectors. With a strong focus on property information, CoreLogic delivers insights that help clients improve risk assessment, optimize decision-making, and enhance performance. Rob, welcome and thank you for joining.
Oh, thanks for having me, Pankaj. Excited to be here. Looking forward to our conversation. And excited to get into it.
Now, risk management is a very amorphous term. It can mean many things to many different people. How do you explain it to a fifth grader? I think I would love to hear it in simple English and simple words, as if you would explain it to a fifth grader.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I guess the way I look at it is you've got to meet the audience where they are, right? So a fifth grader, they're not going to have the experiences that you and I have had a chance to gain over the years, but they probably understand what a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is, right? So something simple and something that they can kind of gravitate toward and understand. So I would use that as kind of the model. And then some of the things with that is identifying risk, right? If you take too much jelly and you smear it on the bread, like the chance is that jelly is going to squish out through the bread and it's going to ruin your sandwich, right? Now, you can do other things to mitigate that risk. Maybe you toast the bread, or maybe you have your mom or dad buy bigger bread, right? And then you could put on more jelly and maybe that supports it. So you're mitigating some of your risk of your sandwich falling apart. And then you can manage it by doing other things where, it could be that you use something other than jelly, right? Maybe you use honey. But at any rate, if that all falls apart, the recovery aspect of that is just going to the fridge and getting the pizza from last night, right? So anyway, I would use those kind of terms to explain it to a fifth grader. But again, it's it's knowing your audience and knowing what's important to them and what's in it for them that then helps kind of spread that message out. But anyway, maybe that works. I need to find a fifth grader to try that out on.
I'll try it with my fourth grader son today. But it seems like, what the example that he gave, and I never thought about it like this, that every day in our lives, we are managing risk in some way or the other. When we go for a drive, or when we are fixing something at our homes, or when we are preparing our sandwiches, we are consciously or unconsciously managing risk. I want to come back to the topic of risk management, Rob. You really nicely explained how risk management can be taught or can be explained to a fifth grader. If you just up-level the discussion from a cyber executive perspective, how do you think about risk, or when you talk about risk internally with your management team or internally at CoreLogic, how do you describe risk to them?
So I guess how I approach that is, one, I want our executive team and our management team, our business partners to be informed, right? So it starts with gathering the information, right? What is it that the business, and this, let's just use that as the example, is looking to do? And understand what those risk elements are, right? What kind of data are we talking about? Who are we going to send this to? How many things are we going to be sending out? And then figuring out from there, start to manage what that risk profile looks like. So it's a lot of collaboration. It's a lot of kind of a give and take type of relationship where I can help them manage the risk that they have from a cyber perspective, right? They're going to know the business side risk that they have. So I share with them the cybersecurity, risks and concerns and things that we can do to mitigate and, kind of transfer risk where we need to. And then I ask them to provide me like, well, what's the business side risk, right? So then you start understanding, the risk of doing something or not doing something, right? So that's how I like to approach kind of risk conversations with, again, business partners or really anyone else, right, on the CoreLogic team, and then have that collaborative kind of open conversation. Security gets kind of tagged as, causing friction, right? And I understand that, right? I understand that speed and automation and capability is important, right? So I don't want to cause too much friction, but I do want to cause some level of friction, right? I want to be able to provide that, back to our business partners and make it to where we're kind of saving ourselves from ourselves, right? And our business partners at CoreLogic are great. Like they totally get this. But bringing perspective and bringing, risks and what we're really facing to the team and then coming up with solutions. Yeah. Kind of a long-winded answer, but that's how I kind of approach it.
And I mean, especially as CoreLogic is a technology player, right? In the real estate world. So cyber becomes like one of the most important risk or angles to consider for the company overall. So I think that I can see how business leaders will react to that. Now, another angle, Rob, which has been historically in the cyber industry or even the business executives, the common phrase has been GRC, like governance, risk, and compliance. So how have you seen G, R, and C evolve over the last 3 to 5 years? How has the mix or the focus among G, R, and C has changed? How do you see them interacting with each other? Because I think that's where a lot of companies started with G and C, the governance and the compliance, and now they are almost adding R to it. Versus others, they have a more holistic approach. So would love to get your insights on G, R, and C.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. I guess I see it more on the risk is coming first, right? So if we think about the last 5 years or so, we're just kind of it's 5 years almost exactly to the day that COVID shut everything down, right? So we were having to deal with a new risk, right? And understanding what that is. So, risk of infection and risk, to the elderly and to children, and just, it was all over the place. We've obviously kind of progressed past that point, but I've always seen it to where, and I don't know what this says about me, but, risk is the thing that's leading the way, right? It's the thing that's out there that you have to account for and then manage, right? So you put the governance and you put the compliance around it, and build that structure to where you're helping yourself manage whatever it is that you're dealing with, whether it's, now I've got to go wear a mask because I don't want to get anyone sick with COVID and I got to wash my hands. So we're mitigating risk in those ways. And now more recently, we've got threat actors that are using social engineering, and it's a new aspect that they're bringing to that, and it's very pervasive. And what do we do to mitigate those risks? So it's almost an arms race, right? Where we've got, kind of this side of things that's elevating and introducing new risk, and then as security professionals, we're having to apply new measures, right? So new governance and new controls and new compliance requirements that we have to put in place in order to meet those new risks. So yeah, I guess I see it in those terms, right? That we have to manage our risks. So the governance and compliance winds up coming in later.
It's interesting because I think risk leading the way. I heard that phrase, and I think it's a great way to describe how risk can lead the way to actually inform governance and compliance also in a meaningful way. Like what are you managing towards? And then based on that, what is the right governance architecture and what are the right compliances to look at? Instead of it the other way around, that you just look at, okay, we need to have compliances because someone has asked for it, and we don't understand the actual business impact or the business risk that might be not considered, even if you're compliant on everything.
Yeah. So I think it's something where, like, in terms of what we do about risk, right, and how we manage those things, I think, looking at like established frameworks that we can kind of lean on and learn from, whether that's NIST or ISO or CSF or PCI or any one of them, right? To be able to have a framework that we can point to and say, these are some of the ways that we can manage these risks, right? And then be able to apply that in a fashion that's actually, addressing the risks that we see, and then making adjustments where we need to, right? So in the event of, a business process or something we're trying to manage, managing that risk, if we've got an established framework, we can start there and then figure out, do we need to turn the dial up on this, right? Are we seeing this as being, this risk is exaggerated? Like we have, significantly more risk with whatever that happens to be. So instead of saying, just using maybe passwords as an example, instead of just saying, oh, I've got an 8-character password today, knowing that it's very weak, turning that up to a 14-character or a 32-character password. Yeah. Again, really simple example, but it's taking that kind of baseline and then elevating it. And then on the other side of it, where we see, some governance and some compliance that is way over what we need to do, turning the dial down. Recently, we went through an exercise of looking at NIST and incorporating that into our policy set. And NIST being used by the federal government and, huge organizations within the Department of Defense, they've got Faraday cages and they've got, all this physical control stuff that's in that NIST 853 framework that we don't need. Yeah. So it's knowing where to turn the dial down. Again, I talked about friction a little while ago, and that's friction we don't need, right? But that's where we have to manage that risk and then adjust accordingly. So,
and on that particular point, and coming back to the theme, which you touched upon earlier, was that every day in cyber is new and can be exciting or can be painful. Hopefully more exciting than painful. Yeah. There's a discussion around risk management also being continuous and automated to reflect the reality of the cyber world, right? Like for example, if I'm doing risk management on let's say macro environment, right? It is continuous, but there is the theme or the frequency of updates is lower, like compared to cyber where every minute things change. So what is your view on automation and continuous risk management? What is it? How will you define it? And what does it mean to you?
Yeah. Well, it's absolutely necessary, right? I mean, I talked about kind of my day a little while ago and things happen overnight, right? We see things happen on the other side of the world that introduce risk for us, right? Maybe there's a threat actor that has launched a ransomware campaign, or there's a new 0-day that's out there that we have to be aware of, right? So having that automation to where I can go into a platform and pull up my dashboard and say, well, now I've got this level of risk, right? So I didn't when I went to bed, and now I've got it, right? That's critical, right? We need to have that in our industry to be able to appropriately manage the risk, because it's moving so fast. So I think, automation is required, right? And the way I think about it, we need to be able to have that level of review and capability to be able to manage the risk that we're having to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And like I said, it's moving really fast. So gone are the days in my mind where you do your risk assessment, in January, and then you come back and maybe you do it in June. And I mean, we've got to be more nimble than that in my mind. And fortunately, we've adopted a more automated process at CoreLogic to be able to address those types of risks and really start to manage that. So
it's like even your internal attack surface is changing daily. You mentioned people working from home, new team members are joining, people are leaving the company, new servers or new environments are being spun up, environments are being shut down. Your attack surface, it's new third parties are coming in, third parties are going out. So the internal attack surface is also dynamically changes. It is not a static environment for you to manage also.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, the endpoint is it's dynamic. It's changing ever since COVID, right? It's been this kind of model of you don't have this monolithic kind of brick and mortar place you go to anymore. At least some don't. But now it's opened up this whole thing where people are working from home or they're working remotely. And yeah, those endpoints, there are so many more of them that we have to manage than we had in the days, before. But
yeah.
I think that's also one of the things that's really, it makes risk management and cybersecurity a really dynamic and exciting kind of field to be in, because it is constantly changing. There's always something we have to be aware of. So
talking about the attack surface changes, if you look at 2024, we just published a study around it that supply chain was a big risk vector. I think more than 60% attacks are happening because or through a supply chain vendor or a partner. How are you tackling that challenge? How are you looking at the supply chain risk?
Yeah, well, thinking about 2024, it was without a doubt a watershed year from a risk management, cybersecurity perspective in the industry that CoreLogic plays in. And I think, thinking about ourselves and then partners and customers that we have, it forced us to be more nimble. It forced us to rethink what we're doing, right? We had threat actors that were executing very successfully campaigns to harvest credentials and to use social engineering to get into different sites. So it really kind of put us in a position where we need to make sure that our processes, right, whether that's our cybersecurity response, and then all the capabilities around that are actionable, right? And that, so conducting additional cybersecurity tabletop exercises with everyone from our CEO, on down, right? Making sure that at that level, we know exactly what we're going to be doing, right? And we train it, multiple times through the year, right? I think the other thing that we wound up doing is looking at, again, what is the risk that we have, right? What are the threat actors doing that maybe we have some exposure to or things that we could do better? Mm-hmm. So improving, what our MFA solutions look like, right? So again, addressing the risk that we had at the time and then figuring out what are the solutions that we can put in place to protect our environment. And then beyond that, protect the ecosystem that we work within, right? So there were a lot of kind of partners and customers that we had that or have had a lot of impact, right, in 2024. So understanding that it's not just, the decisions we make don't just impact us as a company, but they impact the entire industry. Like you said in the intro, CoreLogic plays a significant role in the real estate, mortgage, and insurance businesses and industries. So if we have an event that requires us to shut everything down, there's a lot of impact, right? So, and other partners within that space have those same issues. So I'm sure that, there's been a lot of work since, about this time last year, that companies have had. Certainly CoreLogic has been, very thoughtful around what we're trying to put together. But yeah, 2024 was an interesting year.
Yeah. And Rob, I really love two things about your game plan on third-party risk. One, that all the things that you mentioned are actions that you as CoreLogic are driving. Never did you mention that you're asking your third-party vendors only, like you're only asking, you're actually taking many actions on your side. I call it like similar to like almost like zero trust third-party risk management, where you focus on your own controls. And it is just surprising to me that many security organizations are not looking at third-party risks internally. Like what can they do? And the second thing that I loved is your focus on ecosystem, or looking at is not as one-on-one relationship between you and your partner or vendor, but really looking at it as an ecosystem of like who all might be impacted if an attack happens. And that's how like many 2024 attacks were realized, that these attacks were really small network attacks. They were not just one first party or one company getting impacted. The entire micro ecosystems were impacted. So I think I really love that those two aspects of your strategy around supply chain risk management.
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, I think as leaders within these industries, in my opinion, you've got to have that perspective, right? And if you didn't going into 2024, maybe you do now, or maybe that's changed. But yeah, what's the saying? We're stronger in this. I'm not thinking of the right phrase, but the strength that we gain is, collective, right? It's not individuals, right? Kind of weakest link in the chain type thing. But at any rate, yeah.
In all these initiatives and your role or part of your role as a risk management leader, Rob, how do you interact with the CISO or the CIO or the management team? Like, what's your, what's your philosophy of or your guidance to risk leaders to interact with the CISO and other stakeholders?
Well, so I think in a lot of cases, the people that are talking about risk, right, and working with the CISO, or in my case, as a deputy CISO, I understand kind of the cybersecurity aspects of risk, right? I'm getting better at understanding kind of financial risk and risk of reputational impact and things like that. So there's a lot of different ways where we're managing risk within our organization. So the more that I think that we can have the dialogue around what our other risk functions are seeing, right? Whether that's risk in the mortgage industry, right? We haven't had a great housing market in a while. So that's causing risk. And then that has ripple effects back into not only what we do from an operational perspective, but how we want to be perceived out in the industry, right? So I think the biggest thing, Pankaj, to your question, is having the dialogue, having the conversation with the CISO or with the DCISO or anyone in that level that's managing risk, and have an open and kind of frank conversation around, these are the issues we have, this is how we need to manage risk, and then share those perspectives to come up with hopefully a solution that kind of spans across all these different risk areas. But I guess that would be my my suggestion.
Awesome, Rob. Great advice. And thank you, Rob, for joining us today. And thank you for tuning in to this episode. If you like what you saw, do share it with your colleagues and watch out for the next episode that releases in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, Pankaj.